I've been a trucker for different companies for 10 years. 2 years ago, I was working for a warehouse company in Texas, doing shipments. I usually drove a semi-truck, which I was behind the wheel of on March 15th. It was a cold Monday, so the week was just starting, and a lot of loads needed to be shipped. I was trying to get it all done quickly. I started driving at 3 p.m. and intended to reach the destination that same night. I didn't want to have to pull over somewhere to sleep. I was driving about 5 miles per hour over the speed limit after midnight, which is fast for a semi. I was starting to feel very tired, but the destination was less than an hour away, and I figured I could make it. My eyes were getting dry, and it was becoming a chore just to keep them open. I splashed some water on my hand and rubbed it on my face, which helped a little to wake me up. My truck was the only vehicle on this road at this hour, so besides my headlights, the road was completely dark. I remember reaching to take a sip of my water and almost spitting it out when I saw a figure approaching fast in the distance. I hit the brakes hard, and as the truck slowed down close to a stop, I could better see the features of this person almost standing in the middle of the road. He seemed to be wearing all black with some kind of black scarf wrapped around his neck, and he had an unnaturally long neck. I know it's a weird thing to notice, but it was almost freaky looking. His face, however, was a complete blur. I couldn't make out any features. As my truck slowed down and got closer to this mysterious man, I was about to roll down the window to ask if he needed a ride, but he just turned to his left and darted into the woods. I didn't take an extra second to stop and think about it. I just pressed on the gas pedal again and moved on. Regardless of how freaky it was, I was in a rush. In fact, it wasn't even until about 20 seconds later that my heart really started racing from how strange it really was. Maybe 5 minutes later, I was able to get over it. But just like that, something else happened. As I was back to my cruising speed, I saw something run across the street in front of me. At first, it looked like a big animal, but as I got closer and it crossed into the woods, I realized it looked like another person. I didn't even tap on the brakes this time. I just kept going, and maybe even stepped on the gas a little more because I was starting to get freaked out and wanted to get there faster. Another few minutes went by with nothing happening. However, I was getting increasingly tired and at times was even swerving into the other lane a little bit. With about 40 minutes left in the drive, I didn't know if I could make it anymore. I started looking around for good places to pull over and park for the night. There was eventually a little opening on the side of the road made of gravel. I guess it was meant to be just a little parking rest stop. I pulled the semi into it, parked it, and leaned back to rest my eyes. I fell asleep for not even an hour, just to wake up out of nowhere to the darkness. I still don't know what woke me up, but as I looked outside through the windshield, something in my gut was telling me to turn on the headlights. So I flicked the knob, and the lights lit up the surrounding area in front of my truck. There was something in front of the truck though. A man, the same man with the black scarf I'd seen earlier, standing on the side of the road. Now I could see his face much clearer. He had a very wide smile, and his eyes were open as wide as possible, and he looked right at me through the windshield. I turned the truck on and pulled it out of that little clearing as quickly as possible. I didn't know what to think. How could he have walked 10 miles from where I had seen him last? I didn't stop again that night until I made it to my destination. From there, I fell asleep in the parking lot and woke up early the next morning. The only logical explanation I could think of is that my mind was playing tricks on me because I had been seeing strange things all night. I have never heard of a hallucination being so vivid and terrifying though, and that's the part that still really confuses and scares me. Before getting an office job in the city, I was a UPS driver for 2 years. It was good money, and I enjoyed it for the most part, but it had its moments. It was 2018, and I had been out of college for 2 years. I was working 11 o'clock to 7 o'clock on a Thursday. It was the dead of winter, so it was dark by around 5 o'clock. I wasn't exactly living in a sunny paradise either. I was living in a small town in North Carolina. I don't want to call it rough or run down, but it wasn't a very nice area. I did deliveries in that same town very often. The housing situation in this town was weird. Some blocks would have rows of houses and trailer homes spaced far apart, while other blocks were just completely empty. This made for fewer deliveries altogether because the houses were so spaced out that it took longer than in a regular suburban or urban community. Deliveries were always marked on the map so that I could take a more strategic route instead of just driving all over the place. After hours of deliveries across at least 3 different small towns, I started heading down one of those streets I mentioned. Spaced out trailer homes and small houses on one side, forests on the other. It was a little past 6 p.m., and my shift was winding down with not too many deliveries left. There was one house on this block, and the package needed a signature, meaning I couldn't just leave it on the doorstep. I pulled up in front of the house, went to the back of the truck, and pulled out one of the biggest and heaviest boxes of the day. There were some kind of small metal pieces rattling around inside the box. I couldn't even guess what could be inside. My job was just to lug the thing to the front door of the trailer home, and that's just what I did. There was no doorbell on this home, so I had to knock. There were no lights on inside, and I didn't see a car out front, so I was hoping somebody was home. I knocked a few more times, then I saw the curtains in one of the windows move, and heard footsteps coming to the door. There was a long pause, a suspicious and unnecessarily long pause, before the door finally cracked open. An older woman poked her head out, and when I said she had a package to sign for, she opened the door fully. She seemed fidgety. As I asked her to sign the device, she did so with a sloppy signature. She then told me she needed help carrying the box into her room. I figured that would be the case. The moment I stepped into the trailer home, I got a huge whiff of some kind of stench. You know how every home has a distinct smell, whether good or bad? Well, this home smelled awful. I don't know what it was. She was leading me to a back section behind the tiny living room space. She took me to a narrow hallway where I struggled to carry the box, and then brought me to a door. She opened the door and told me to maneuver the box into the closet in the back of the room. I asked her to turn on the light, but she said the light didn't work. It was almost pitch black in there, the only source of light being the lamp from the living room seeping down the hall into this room. I could see just enough to navigate the box inside. As I got close to the closet, I saw someone standing in the corner. I knew for certain it was a person because of the shape of the outline and the slight movement. There was no logical explanation for this. This person was clearly hiding from me, waiting. I left the box where it was, walked past the woman, and said, "Have a nice day." She started to scream at me to come back and help her, even calling me a piece of trash. I didn't know what this woman and whoever was in that closet were planning on doing, and I didn't want to stick around to find out. I went on with my shift and went home that night. Thus began my job hunt for a newer, better job. I have been a truck driver since I was 30, and I've done a lot of night drives and had my fair share of odd experiences. I did deliveries for various companies, often driving across states to make shipments to receiving companies or stores. One day, I had to drive from one side of Arizona to the other to deliver a trailer full of wooden furniture. Much of the drive was through open desert roads. It was going to be a long journey, and I already had a late start to the day, so I knew most of my drive would be in the dark. Given the nature of these desert roads at night, how straight they are and how little traffic there is, I could push the truck a little faster than usual. As I drove, I saw the flashing rear lights of a car in the distance. I had to hit the brakes hard to bring the truck to a stop. When I finally pulled up behind the car, it was an old Chevy Impala, parked on the side of the road with its hazard lights on. I got out of my truck to check if they needed help. I walked over to the car and tapped on the window, but got no response. I bent down to look into the car through the tinted windows and saw that no one was inside. I looked out into the dark desert, but I couldn't see much. Feeling especially helpful that night, I went back to my truck and got a flashlight from the toolbox under the passenger seat. It was a heavy-duty tactical flashlight, bright enough to hurt your eyes. As soon as I turned it on, it revealed what appeared to be an abandoned gas station on the side of the road. Apparently, I hadn't noticed it before because the whole area was basically dirt with only 2 gas pumps. Behind them was a small building that was probably a store at one point. It made the most sense that whoever owned the car was in that building. I went to the front door, which was permanently jammed open, and the flashlight lit up a decent portion of the room inside. It looked like an old convenience store. I called out to let anyone know I was there to help. There was a slight echo, which gave me chills. Then I heard a noise, probably a shoe scraping against the floor on the other side of the room, behind some shelves. I called out again, offering my help, and then heard a deep whisper saying, "Get out." I was also hearing heavy breathing in one corner of the room. It was enough to make me leave quickly. On my way back to my truck, I was confused and didn't know if what I was hearing was real. I ran to my truck and called 911 because I was too scared to go back in that building. They asked for my exact location, but all I could say was that I was by an abandoned gas station on some road in the desert. They asked me to stay on the line to describe my location better, but suddenly the car in front of me turned on and started speeding down the desert road. I didn't even notice him get into his car. It was so dark, and I was so distracted by the phone call. I ran back into the building to see if anybody was still in there, while, of course, keeping 911 on the line. I went to the back section where I'd heard the voice and breathing, and I was mortified to see a fresh pool of blood on the floor. I could only imagine what had happened. I explained on the phone that I believed I had just stumbled into a crime scene. Eventually, they were able to send a bunch of state troopers to the scene. They asked me for any information I could give: the license plate number, what the suspect looked like, what I thought had happened. All I said was that it was a black Chevy Impala, early 2000s, and I heard a man tell me to get out before hearing a woman scream as they left the building. There was no body left behind, but I had a few ideas of what might have happened. I'm sure the state police took some blood samples and whatnot, but I wasn't able to be of much more assistance. Shamefully, I did not have a dash cam at that point to get the license plate number, but literally the next week, I installed a dash cam into my assigned truck. This was just one of those once-in-a-lifetime experiences that will always haunt me.